G'day, Chris here and welcome back to ClickSpring. So with the metonic dial complete, we can now have a look at the so-called Saros dial, that section of the mechanism that indicates eclipse possibilities. Much of the detail of that cycle is presented in episode 7 of this build series on constructing the Saros and Exellimos gear train, so be sure to check that out if you haven't already done so. There's also a lot of other technical concepts relating to eclipses that are a lot of fun to learn about. So be sure to also check out the links in the description on those topics too. In this video, I'm mostly going to go through how the machine presented the eclipse data for the user to interpret, and how the various elements and features of the mechanism that made that possible were formed. But as a quick recap, you'll recall that a Saros period is 223 lunar months in duration. One Saros period after a given eclipse, the Earth, Sun and Moon all return to roughly the same positional relationship, and so we get a very similar eclipse. And those repeating ever so slightly changing eclipses form what's known as a Saros series, typically running at more than 70 eclipses in a given series, and with each series spanning roughly 1,300 years. The period of time when the Earth, Sun and Moon are suitably arranged for eclipses is known as the eclipse season. This is a period of time a little over 1 month in duration, that continuously repeats at an interval of a little less than 6 months. So, based on that and the fact that this dial, like the metonic dial, is divided into lunar month cells, we'd expect to see clusters of eclipse possibilities on our Saros dial at intervals of roughly every 5 or 6 months. Now you'll notice that I've been referring to eclipse possibilities rather than simply eclipses, and that's because whilst an eclipse may occur, it won't necessarily be visible to the operator of the mechanism. A lunar eclipse is only visible to the night side of the Earth, and a solar eclipse is highly dependent on location. So that even though the Saros cycle does present eclipse possibilities, if a prediction is, for example, for a solar eclipse to occur during the local daytime, it may not necessarily result in an observable eclipse for whoever is reading the dial. The Saros cycle also has the complicating issue of the 1/3 day remainder covered in episode 7, that continually shifts the location of the eclipses from a given Saros series about 1/3 of the way around the Earth with each subsequent occurrence. And so it quickly becomes clear that presenting eclipse information in an easily understood way on a single plate isn't particularly straightforward. A key issue is how to direct the user to only the data that's intended to be read in relation to a given eclipse out of the total amount of information presented on the dial plate. And one of the most interesting things about how the machine was designed and constructed is just how familiar the solution to this issue appears to our modern eyes. In our modern life, we're familiar with the use of footnotes, endnotes and indexes when reading complex documents, where a small character acts as a key to take us to some more elaborate text explanation elsewhere in a document. And we're also familiar with an analogue pointer that travels over a divided scale that might indicate some sort of numerical or text data, like for example a pressure gauge. That both of these techniques were used to such great effect on a more than 2,000-year-old device provides an excellent illustration of how the same solutions can often present, regardless of the assumed technology and resources of the era. The pointers are of simple construction, and like the rest of the device, built to the limits of the material science of the day. The scans of the wreckage show a slender tab feature that served to guide the pointer around the curved slots of the dials, as well as two of the most delicate components of the mechanism, tiny pins carefully inserted into the tip of each pointer structure that serve to indicate an exact position on each of the dials. Now, the fact that both the Metonic and Saros dials have the lunar month as their elemental unit is no coincidence. In fact, it's the key to properly understanding how to read the entire backplate display. There are 223 month cells in sequence, laid out in a 4-turn spiral pattern. 223 being a prime number makes its division over 4 turns a little more difficult than the Metonic dial. So how might it have been done? Well, maybe it was stepped off manually, or by using a dividing plate like I've shown previously. But as it happens, there was already a dividing machine on hand to do the job, and that's of course the machine itself. The pointers are a free and easy sliding fit within their respective carriers, and the tab on each is designed to move freely within the spiral slot of each dial. Once the pointers have been fastened onto their arbors, the mechanism is wound back slightly and then advanced to take up the backlash to begin from a suitable starting point, with the Metonic pointer exactly aligned with the start of a month, and the Saros pointer aligned with the vertical axis of the backplate. The device is then carefully wound forward a single month at a time, and the corresponding position in the Saros dial marked off to generate all 223 lunar month divisions. These simple point marks then serve to guide a more formal straight line division that'll then be later engraved as the permanent month cell markings. So this division process makes clear the direct mechanical relationship between the month cells of the Metonic dial and the month cells of the Saros dial. The user was expected to observe the pointer enter a given month in the Metonic calendar dial, and then check for an eclipse possibility in the corresponding month cell on the Saros dial. The presence of a so-called glyph indicated the details of the possible eclipse, with more explanatory text to be found around the plate. Now there's a lot to absorb here, so as I mark out all of this in preparation for engraving, let's first decode the glyphs so that we can start reading exactly what the ancients were reading. Firstly, an empty cell means no eclipse is possible for that month. And as we'd expect with the 5 to 6 month interval between eclipse seasons, the majority of cells are in fact empty. But around 50 of the cells do contain glyphs. A lunar glyph indicated a lunar eclipse was possible mid-month during full moon. A solar glyph indicated a possible solar eclipse at the end of the month at new moon. And a combined lunar and solar glyph would indicate both. An engraved sigma, intended as an abbreviation for Selene, the goddess of the moon, indicates a lunar eclipse. An eta, intended as an abbreviation of Helios, the sun god, indicates a solar eclipse. The symbol that combines a lowercase omega and rho is an abbreviation for aura, to indicate the hour. And the characters that follow this symbol indicate the hour of the day or the hour of the night as appropriate that the given eclipse would occur. Some cells also contain a compact display of nu and ypsilon, which is an abbreviation of nyktos, intended to indicate during the night. And some cells contain a compact display of eta and mu, which is an abbreviation of imeras, intended to indicate during the day. Now, it might seem odd to be talking about lunar eclipses during the day and solar eclipses at night, but when talking about eclipses from a particular Saros series, an eclipse predicted to occur at a given local time will occur at intervals of roughly 8 hours with each subsequent appearance, hence the term triple Saros. So, to determine the correct time of syzygy according to the glyphs, the inscribed hour figure is modified according to what the Exellimos pointer indicates. Either 0, 8 or 16 hours are added to the base number. And so whilst a particular lunar eclipse prediction, for example, may well be predicted to occur during the day, and so not be visible, a subsequent occurrence from that same Saros series, with the additional hours added to the glyph time, may well be shifted into the local night time of the mechanism user, and so therefore, in principle at least, be observable. Now at the bottom of the glyphs are index letters that reference inscriptions around the perimeter of the back plate, and describe some characteristics of the eclipses. The only such text that we have remaining in the wreckage relates exclusively to solar eclipses, and it references concepts like colour, magnitude and direction that don't neatly map onto our modern understanding of eclipse phenomena. But that fact makes it no less interesting to read the translations, as we'll see in a moment. Okay, so let's have a go at properly reading the glyph that we've just been discussing, which has 2 eclipse predictions as well as an index letter. The first line has a sigma for Selene, so we know it's a lunar eclipse prediction. The hour symbol is followed by a theta, so this is indicating the eclipse will occur at the 9th hour. There is no imeras symbol, so we know that's the 9th hour of the night, the standard situation for a lunar eclipse. The second line has an eta for Helios, so we know we have a solar eclipse prediction. Again, the hour symbol is followed by a theta, so this is indicating the eclipse will occur at the 9th hour. There is no nyktos symbol, so we know that's the 9th hour of the day, the standard situation for a solar eclipse. The index letter in this case is a rho with a small bar above it. And referencing the solar eclipse only, if we move to that section of the plate indicated by this index letter, we can see that the barred row exists as one of at least 4 index letters referencing a section of text directly above that extends for the 6 lines between this and the previous row of index letters. And we see that the text describes the characteristics associated with the solar eclipse prediction of our glyph, if indeed it should turn out to be observable for the user. Now, while the precise intent of this text has been lost over time, there's no mistaking its dramatic tone. And as if that wasn't enough to keep our ancient mechanism user busy, we also have a feature known as the full moon cycle built into its design, that not only explains the 4-turn structure of the Saros dial, but by virtue of its ability to predict the angular size of the moon, provides the user with an intuitive way to further elaborate and perhaps cross-check the characteristics of a given eclipse. Now, even with all this information built into its design, it's reasonable to question just how practical this machine would have been as a strict eclipse prediction tool. But at the very minimum, in the hands of an informed user, it would have been an exceptional tool to demonstrate all of the eclipse theory and phenomena as understood in the period. In any case, the task for the maker was to collate all of this technical detail and then accurately capture it on the back plate of the mechanism. the symbols that we've been discussing really start to come alive once cut into metal. The hour symbol, for example, is a standout. Once you've seen this symbol, you'll never again forget it. And the same applies for the Niktos and Imeras abbreviations. Tiny little markers indicating such complex ideas. And perhaps the most interesting symbol of all, this character that looks a little like a modern 2, that's referred to in the research as a hooked alpha, in this case used as a special character to extend the set of possible index letters. Now you'll already be aware that the recovered sections of the dial are in very poor condition, with only around 1/3 of it existing in the wreckage. So naturally there's some uncertainty about the glyph positions for the missing section of the dial and some of the backplate inscriptions around the perimeter. So I've engraved only those characters that have been confidently identified in the wreckage, leaving the conjectural characters lightly scratched, so that the actual evidence from the wreckage, for the time being at least, remains distinguished from the conjecture. Okay, so now let's put everything together from this and the previous video to read a complete presentation from the back plate. Winding the mechanism forward, we see the Saros pointer just enter a cell with an eclipse prediction glyph. And we see that the month pointer has just reached the month of Agrianios in the 14th year of the current Metonic cycle, which, as it happens, is also an intercalary year. The assumed Calippic dial is coming to the end of its first quadrant, consistent with us approaching the end of the first of the 4 Metonic cycles of the current Calippic cycle. And the games dial is approaching the end of the second quadrant, indicating that we're nearing the end of the year of the Nemean and Naan games. On the Saros dial, we can see from the detail of the glyphs that the first line indicates a lunar eclipse, nominally at the 6th hour of the night. And we know from the requirements for a lunar eclipse that this will be around the middle of the month at full moon. The second line indicates a solar eclipse, nominally at the 12th hour of the day. And because of the nature of a solar eclipse, that'll be at the end of the month at new moon. A quick check of our Exalimos dial to see if there is to be any changes to those times, and we see that the Exalimos pointer is still in the first partition, indicating no addition to those glyph times is required, so they stand as engraved. And finally, we see the index letter is a pi symbol with a bar. There are no lunar eclipse description text surviving in the wreckage, but we do have text describing the solar eclipse for this particular cell. The barred pi shares a line with a number of other index letters, including, for example, the hooked alpha mentioned previously. And we see the text above this letter group describing some of the characteristics of our solar eclipse prediction. Now, if you're enjoying going through this process and you'd like to have a go at decoding some more of these glyphs on your own, I've recorded a short video over on the ClickSpring Clips channel. It's a bit of a glyph quiz, so be sure to check that one out when you can. You'll find a link in the description. In the meantime though, of course, if we keep winding the mechanism, we'll eventually reach the end of one spiral or the other and need to reset the pointer. This is as simple as unpinning, returning the tab to the centre of the spiral, and then repinning the pointer assembly. With this fairly straightforward user intervention, the gearing relationships between the pointers of the back plate can essentially be perpetually maintained. So that's the reconstruction of the back plate of the mechanism complete for the time being. And it provides us with closure on some important features of the mechanism. It gives us a decent indication of where the device may have been both made and perhaps intended to be used. It puts the gearing that survived to the present day into context within a comprehensive and synchronised calendar and eclipse prediction display. and in doing that, provides us a brief glimpse of the astronomical, mathematical and engineering expertise of the ancient Greek culture that created the Antikythera mechanism. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.